The process of healing addictions is never easy, because being true to oneself always has its price.
What happened was I was in bed, and a knock came on the door, and it was one of those knocks that I knew it was the police before I went to the door. I just knew it. And I got out of bed, put on my dressing gown, and as I was walking to the door, I could see through the crack in the blinds. There were blinds on it, like on these windows. And they were closed, but I could just see through the crack. And I looked through the crack, and I saw two guys standing there with badges and guns in their hands. And I opened the door, and I looked at them, and they said, "Are you Brian O'Day?" And I said, "Oh, I wish I wasn't, but I am."
As a young boy growing up in Nova Scotia, Canada, Brian experienced extended sexual abuse while attending a Catholic boys' school run by priests. During adolescence, alcohol and other drugs provided a pleasant escape from his shame and anger. As Brian has said about his past, his drug of choice was more. So he set off to pursue a life of drugs and danger, eventually hopping back and forth between Jamaica and South America, smuggling hemp. Yet despite moving in a world of violence, he never carried a gun. Brian admits, however, that he was running away from his own fears until a heart attack in 1987, induced by a coke binge, compelled him to turn his life around. He successfully completed a month-long drug treatment program at the Cottage Care Unit in Santa Barbara, California. It was in fact his second visit, and this time he became drug-free and started doing volunteer counseling in 1988. But helping people face the challenge of addiction with his weekly recovery group couldn't erase his own courtship with drugs. And in 1990, the DEA came knocking at his door.
They started with, "You know why we're here?" And I said, "Nope." "Don't bullshit us. You know why we're here." I said, "Why don't you tell me why you're here?" And we went back and forth at this little game for a while.
Brian was told that a federal grand jury was going to indict him for conspiracy to import 65 tons of marijuana into the United States in 1986 and 87. His past had finally caught up with him, and he had to share the truth of it with his children, whose mother he had been separated from since his heart attack.
What it means when you get 10 years in prison, and it's called an unparolable narcotics offense, so I won't be able to get parole. But they call it MR, mandatory release, and you get released after 2/3. So what it means is that
6 years or so.
6 2/3 years, and then I get another 3 days a month off for being in a camp, and another 2 days a month or so for working. What it means is that I'll be out in a halfway house within 5 years or so.
Like
5 years,
Randy
3
was.
months.
I thought it was all about Canada and everything, so from when I was little, I knew something like this would happen later on in life, so. Because Mom and Dad would always talk about, like, they'd tell me and my sister if anybody ever, like, came and asked for my dad to just say that he wasn't here or something like that, so.
Think it's going to be tough for your sister to hear this?
Very.
Yeah?
She won't really understand most of it, but just the, like, main idea of it, that's what's gonna be hard for her.
What do you mean?
Like, you're gonna be gone, like, she's gonna be, I don't know, she just deals with things differently.
If you do something against the law, you should be punished.
What they were interested in was they said that we imported marijuana from Vietnam in twice, 1986 and 1987.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they heard that from somebody, and that they were going to arrest me eventually. And so I went to see Uncle Terry, told him. He got me a lawyer, which is this guy who's turned out to be a real good guy, Brendan O'Neill.
Mm-hmm.
And then in April I got indicted, and I got charged by the grand jury with conspiracy to import marijuana into the United States. And if I was convicted as charged, I was looking at 20 years to life imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to serve 17 years in prison, at least. That would mean that you'd be 30 before I got out.
My friends always joke about it, saying like, it'd be funny to see your dad on America's Most Wanted and stuff like that, so. See, for me, it's like, the only thing that really bothers me about it is that people, they look at me from the way my father used to be, and they expect that when I get older, I'm going to be the same exact way. And so
You'd be different though, right?
yeah.
Because you wouldn't get caught, right?
I wouldn't do it, period. And then he acts like he's proud of going to jail, and he doesn't think he's done one thing wrong except,
When I did it, what I did,
yeah.
I never, ever felt I was doing anything wrong. I always felt that I was doing the right thing. Not only did I not feel that I was doing anything wrong, I always thought I was being of service. Beside the point, I did something that was against the law, I got convicted, and I'm going to jail.
You think someone should be punished for that?
Yeah,
Why?
because they did the wrong thing. It was a long time ago, and I don't
Yeah.
understand why they're punishing
No.
him for it now.
You don't.
I don't understand that. Because he doesn't do it anymore. He's sober now, but he used to do it then. They should have said it a long time ago. He's going to go in there and he says that he's not going to do anything wrong. But he's going to help. There's people in jail that need help, and he's going to help them.
I've seen depicted either in film or somehow that kids who've had their parents as buddies have complained about it the other way, that they've wanted their parent to be parent. Well, I'm both with Shai. I am at once and at the same time his friend and his father, and the same with my daughter.
For some reason, it's strange, because I can talk about it easier on video than I could just to my dad or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you guys sat down and tried to talk about it?
Yeah, but usually I'm just sitting there listening, and he's doing the talking. So.
And every part of my body was shaking. I mean, every frigging hair on my body was just vibrating. And the only part of my body that worked well were my eyes. And so no matter what they were saying or intimating, I could look them right in the eye. And that's the only thing that I had was my eyes.
There was no evidence against Brian except the testimony of other people arrested in the case. The federal prosecutor was Mark Bartlett, and he admitted that he felt badly about Brian's harsh sentence. But as far as arranging for a smaller prison term, his hands were legally tied because Brian would not testify against former friends.
I think they've done a great job, actually, in stifling or squashing the marijuana trade, the Thai trade in the United States, because it's the easiest group to hit. The Colombians are people you want to back off of. They're violent. They'll kill agents, they kill judges, they kill presidents of countries. I don't think you've made too much of a dent in the trafficking of cocaine, the trafficking of heroin. But marijuana, the people involved in that are not a violent group and much easier to attack.
So I got an attorney, Brendan O'Neill. He called the prosecutor's office in Seattle and said, I'm representing Brian O'Day, And if you are going to indict him, please let me know, and we will surrender him to the court. Don't just come and rip him off the street, okay? We will be there.
Brian is accepting that because, one, that's what the reality is. That's the conclusion of his matter. But two, Brian's a unique person who has now a rare ability to confront and deal with the truth. And he also is at a point in his life where he has to be accountable for everything he's done. He's undergone a long process of self-evaluation.
I think the major thing is that Brian did not choose to cooperate against other people in this group. I spoke to Brian about it.
And they hammered him for it.
Well, they do tend to be, more severe with people who don't cooperate. That's their prerogative. That's the government. You don't do what the government wants, you're fighting City Hall. They offered Brian the same deal they gave everybody else. You cooperate and your sentence can be cut in half. And he knew that. And I don't know how much information, in fact, I don't think it was even meaningful what information that he could give them. The fact that they want you as part of your own rehabilitation process, in their eyes, to roll over, inform on your friends and the people you were involved with, is key to them.
The penalties being imposed are way out of proportion to what the offense, the harm created by the offense. I think in O'Day's case, and I was thinking about this earlier when I was on a run, I think everybody will agree that although marijuana is illegal, the possible harmful effects are not nearly as bad as some other things that occur.
Even alcohol.
Even alcohol. The difficulty in O'Day's case is that the scale of things was so grand, and there was so much marijuana and so much money that the system said, we can't allow this to happen. These guys are becoming too big, and we have to bring them down. Even though, after the products brought into the country and broken down and sold in $100 or $200 quantities, and people in the ordinary middle class way of life are smoking marijuana relatively harmlessly, these guys are so big, we can't allow this to happen.
What happened to Brian was he got caught up in being all things to all people in this particular case. I think the prosecutor and the authorities involved thought that Brian was much more involved in this case than he really was, because Brian wanted to be everywhere with everybody. He wasn't doing anything, but he was around. He was involved with the people who were on the beach, involved with the people who were in the trucks, involved. He just wanted friends. He had a tremendous need. His basic insecurities made him want to be with everybody and do everything.
I mean, he knows everybody in this town, and everybody, Brian, everyone jumps up and hugs him, and he knows everybody and has a relationship with millions of people, it seems, everywhere we go. And when his kids come up here, they say, Dad knows everybody in Santa Barbara. We have to stop and say hi to everybody everywhere we go.
And there are legions of people who really love Brian for the help that he's provided them. And what we're doing now is removing him from that opportunity to help other people and warehousing him. That's what our system is doing to Brian now. And they're doing that based on something that took place in 1986 and 1987.
Oh, I'm a little bit angry at the system in that they have no possible leeway whatsoever to deal with someone of Brian's, let's say, newfound character. This system, this criminal law system, doesn't even need lawyers anymore. The judge opens a book, he looks at one page, looks at another, says how much was involved, how much money was involved, how much drugs were involved, your role, 15 years, 12 years. They can do it with a computer.
It doesn't seem to make sense to me that what this country wants to do with someone like Brian is grab him and lock him up for 10 years. Because he is working on the drug problem in this country right now and has been for the last year and a half. So, and as far as I'm concerned, I think that's what we're trying to do in this country, is solve the drug problem and make it better. And I see that Brian is doing that now. And it just doesn't make sense to me the way the country wants to deal with it, to lock people up, put them in jail, and we don't do anything about rehabilitation. So I see it that he's fighting his war on drugs right now, and he should keep doing it.
Well, the entire criminal system is not geared toward getting people off drugs. It's geared toward finding, prosecuting, and punishing people who are selling drugs. The efforts toward decreasing demand by making people aware of substance abuse and its dangers, that's basically an ignored stepchild in our system.
I think the key to everything here is education. I don't believe you can't beat it out of somebody. I believe that you take the profit motivation out of drugs and educate our youth, and you won't have the problem. But you can't keep throwing people in prisons. The prisons are going to explode. The prison system is about ready to explode right now.
We're not here to rehabilitate, and we're not here to deter. We're here to punish. So, I agree with you. It doesn't really help anybody who gets in there. It punishes them. And that's what society's goal is in this system.
At one point, they wanted me to tell them what I knew about what they were there about, and I said, I don't know anything. I don't have anything to say. And this guy, the bad cop guy, looked at me and he said, look, we know what you do. You work with alcoholics and drug addicts at that hospital. We don't care about that. This is not about change or rehabilitation. This is about crushing your life, motherfucker. Now do the right thing. And I said, oh, I want to call my lawyer. That was about the rightest thing that I could think of doing.
One month after the visit from the DEA, Brian was indicted, with bail set at $250,000. He put up some property, but it was seized as ill-gotten goods.
This is pretty good. Now this works, you just put it in here. Actually, this is what you do.
You could do one of those TV shows like that lady with the waffle on.
Right.
Chilling.
Selling Brian O'Day's recipes from the Pokies.
From the bathroom.
So he was arrested and taken to Sonoma County Jail near Seattle, where his trial would be held. His arrest shocked and troubled those who knew him, especially the therapists and doctors that had been working with him for over 2 years.
I've actually used Brian's example with clients, with younger people, and described him as a good, solid man, and that when there is such a black hole in the heart because something happened or something wasn't filled when it was supposed to be filled, then the people do try to do something about that, and drugs is one way of doing that, and it's not to excuse it but to explain it.
What I see is somebody who's very afraid about what's coming up next, which is going to jail.
For a long time.
For a long time. And yet somebody who has a deep and abiding trust in himself as somebody who can make it through that kind of an experience and still retain wholeness.
I don't understand why Brian needs to experience this, but I trust it because it's happening. And I trust Brian's inner wisdom and his inner strength and his inner creativity and power to handle it in a way that will enhance everybody he touches in that prison.
In terms of psychological growth and the sense of self, it's the most essential thing in early childhood. And the public is learning it a little bit more finally at last, how important it is to mirror a child in terms of the psychological self. As far as I'm concerned, there's another kind of mirroring that you mentioned, and that's to mirror the spiritual self. And if that's not done, is what you have, particularly with special children, is a wounded hero child.
I was out on bail, and they did what's called a Nebbia hearing, which investigated the source of the bail that I was out on. They found the source of the bail to be tainted and went, we'll have that, thank you very much, and you go right back to jail. And nabbed the bail, threw me in jail. So I'm in jail in a room built for 30 with 130 people, sleeping on the floor, under a 24-hour-a-day fluorescent light and ventilation fan. And I'm beside myself with anguish. because this wasn't a part of the plan. You see, eventually I was going to jail, but not now and not ever. Snohomish County Jail, for Christ's sake.
That's when I said to my husband, I mean, you know, if there's anything we can do. And he was instant, Benny was instant, which is very unusual for him in terms of his response. We had no question, that we had no choice.
So I'm phoning everybody. Get me the fuck out of here. So I called Rico, and he said, well, Brian, it's a policy of mine not to put up my house. I said, Dave, I just need a little help here. If you think you can put your house up, imagine. And he said, well, I have a policy not to put my house up. I did discuss this with Regina, and we have that policy. However,
it never occurred to us. We didn't even discuss it. Benny and I didn't discuss it as a matter that was discussable. It was just how to do it as fast as possible.
So you put up property that you had that was going to be your nest egg, so to speak. And then, as I understand it, you also had to tie that to your own home?
Only because we had hoped to sell the property so I can slow down working, because I was planning on the pregnancy at the time.
You weren't pregnant, but you were planning.
Yeah, and that was my only hope, to slow down working. And so that was a painful choice, but how can someone put that before someone's freedom, even if it's quote-unquote just a friend or someone quote-unquote that you haven't known that long? But I have a thing about freedom, and I have a thing about prison.
Let's say Brian may feel fear about going to jail, which I would say is appropriate. Well, the way one acts upon fear is by fleeing or fighting. So, for instance, he could run away. He could escape to Canada. He could change his name and disappear. Okay? That would be acting in accord with the feeling of fear, because now I'm taking flight. He's not doing that. Instead, he's letting the fear be there without running away from it.
It's a farce to me, really, to have a totally rehabilitated man go to prison for an insane length of time, to do nothing but, I mean, he might do quite a few constructive things in there. He did, even when he was there in Sonoma jail, the way he dealt with the prisoners there, because he has that powerful way of interacting with people. He said several people started crying when he spoke with them, which is very unusual for hardened. But he has that ability to touch people and soften them. And in his groups, he does that too. But
he does a group now at the hospital, working with people who are alcoholics or drug addicts. He's already doing that.
Right. Yeah.
And so he would do that same kind of thing there.
Brian had reached a place in his life where he wanted to take full responsibility for his choices rather than defend them. Consequently, he made a guilty plea bargain with Mark Bartlett. In return, he was allowed to surrender himself to the prison and serve a sentence between 10 and 12.5 years, which a judge would determine. Brian's friends and people he had counseled were bewildered by these turn of events.
When he first came to me, and he was facing 45 years, he came because he knows in my life I've been where he is today. And my first thought and feeling was, run. Even though he came to me for advice. And of course it was all straightened out and understood on a deeper level. And what I think is that he's got a great deal of courage, and that he trusts God. And that when the door closes, there'll be a period of some reality therapy.
The only thing I can honestly say about it is that I admire Brian's attitude right now so much. I think it's incredible that he's going in with a party. I mean, that he's going in with a good attitude. Of course, to see someone have to go for 10 years for marijuana just makes me sick. But the thing is that, you know, he's sober, and he got sober, and he's facing the music. He's facing what we call the wreckage of his past. And I just thought that was incredible. I thought that was a courageous thing to do.
He seems so peaceful. And that this guy is going off to jail for 10 years, it just shocked me. It just, what can I say? Blew my mind.
I don't think that it's fair. For all the things that he does, all the good that he does for the community and for the people at the hospital that I work at, and the time that he puts in doing groups and helping people that are in detox, and just being there and reaching out his hand, he's already done more than he can't do any good in jail. I mean, possibly he could.
Where Brian is going to jail, he's going to need to create his own reality there. And we all have that capability and that capacity to do that. And I have a lot of faith that Brian is going to be he's going to be more than able to do that in the place where he's at.
Your attitude is fantastic, that accepting this, that this is part of that plan that's written for you. And instead of going out raging against injustice and the darkness, accepting it and seeing what you can do for you, what it's going to mean for you and what it may mean for other people. And where this takes you, you have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to let go like that and trust that, that's tremendous. That's tremendous.
You know, events just always have two sides to them. You know, good fortune and bad, you know. But they always may on the surface seem like it's something bad, but that there's something good to be gleaned out of it. Isn't that one of the only ways you can look at it? I mean, when there's something like this going on, I mean, you got to kind of take that attitude.
You know, see, what happens to me is every time I talk to him about it, I start crying. I'm just a little on the emotional side.
Last night was the first time I had a hard time. I cried myself to sleep.
You know, in the little problems I've had in my life, I haven't handled them with nearly as much confidence and serenity. But maybe it's attributed to partly the program, but it must be directly attributed to a spiritual contact, which gives you a little peace, no matter what kind of a problem there is.
And what's the old saying, you know, in AA, if you go to a meeting and everyone in the room puts his or her troubles on the table and you got a chance to choose, you'll take your own back.
Yeah.
And when you make a pitch and when they find out what's facing you and they look at your attitude, it makes them look at their own situation and say, hey, I've never been so damn lucky in my life, you know.
And it's interesting, I would still, laying everybody's troubles on the table, including mine, I'd still take mine back,
right,
even
right.
knowing what I know
Right.
about what's happening to me. Isn't that amazing?
There were several members in Brian's recovery group who were happy to share their positive experience of him as a drug counselor. But curiously enough, he chose not to allow the camera to film his work.
Why didn't you want to film the group for this? Because that was something we talked a lot about, and something that everybody has talked about in terms of what you have to offer to the community and what is...
Well, my initial reaction when we first were going to do that was, my gut feeling was, no, I don't want to do that. As I worked with it, it kept getting louder and clearer that this wasn't supposed to be done, but I was going to do it anyway. And eventually it got to the point where I just had to listen and pay attention. So that's the gut instinct. I think you're asking for a head answer. So I'm not clear if my head answer is satisfactory or not, but I'll give you what my head tells me too. Okay. My head tells me that it's a violation of the confessional, almost. Having the camera there, you might not get what the group is about, and chances are you won't.
But would we have lost anything by having the camera there?
You know, the chance that you might lose something and that someone in there might lose something by having the camera there is worth it to keep it out.
Maybe this is just a way. Maybe this is just a way of some type of covert rationalization to make it seem like it's okay. Because I'll tell you, I was aware of what was going on, obviously, and I think when we had the party, it really dawned on me. I remember because I was up on stage while we were playing, and I said something from the stage to the effect of, remember, this is a celebration. You know, we're here to celebrate Brian's change in life. And at that moment, it struck me that it was a very sad thing.
In 1989, Brian met Susanna Lewis, who remained closest to him during his months of preparation for prison. Their relationship was probably both strained and strengthened by the whole situation, and undoubtedly she saw other dimensions to him than what he showed his friends.
I knew when I first met him, I asked him why he moved to Santa Barbara, and he said he moved here to get sober. That was the first thing he told me, and I said, how's that going? And he said, great. And he had been sober then, I guess, about 9 months. But I didn't know anything else. I didn't know about his past. I didn't know that any of this other stuff might happen. It sort of came out slowly over the months.
I spent a lot of time struggling with it. Susanna probably told you. You know, for the first few months it was tough. We went through a lot.
I tried to get away. I tried to get out of the relationship. I thought, this is not something I want to do. I don't want to be involved in this. This is too hairy. It's too intense. I shouldn't have to go through this. I have nothing to do with this. This is not my lifestyle. I can find somebody who's, you know, an architect or, you know, somebody normal who has a regular job and be in a regular relationship. I don't have to do this. But it didn't work out. I tried to get away, and it wasn't really the right thing for me to do.
How long did that last?
4 days.
4 days. So then you came back saying, I'm going to help Brian through his war on drugs.
Well, I came back. We had a talk about it, and I realized that it didn't make any sense. What I was doing wasn't really for the right reasons. So I came back, and I decided on my own that I was going to stay. I wasn't going to allow myself the opportunity to waffle anymore. That was it. Once I'd come back that time, I was going to stick it out. Because I knew that going through what he was going through, he needed support and it was going to make it too much harder to have somebody around who was going, well, maybe I want to do this, maybe I don't want to do it. So I decided I would do it and just hang in with him and ride it out.
We went through a lot of feelings back and forth, and anxiety and lack of understanding, or not seeing the same way, and it made it tough.
I realized it was me that had something wrong with me, and I was the one who didn't want to make a commitment. And I always found inappropriate men to have relationships with, and then I could get mad at them for not wanting to marry me because they were already married, or, you know, some other thing that was already set up when I got there. Right. But I would, you know, then I could tell everybody, he's such a jerk. He's still married. I've always really been a loner and been pretty good at it. Being in relationships has been harder for me than being on my own. Some people I know sort of are addicted to relationships. 2 weeks out of one, they have to get into another. But I've never been like that. So I don't really worry about being on my own, although I know it'll be lonely. It'll be a big change. But I'll do something else. I'll work harder. You know, I'll have less fun and work harder. Maybe I've gotten into another situation with somebody who's unavailable. Maybe I'm in another one of those relationships. Right. Where it can't work because of this other thing. Maybe it's another one of those, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's just a test. I don't know, I guess to him, he wants to be able to think he has a girlfriend waiting for him outside, and that makes it seem better. But at the same time, it seems weird to me to say, I'll wait for you for 7 years. That seems like, who the hell would be waiting for you when you got out? Like some psycho girl, you know? I mean, that would just be so weird and so unhealthy. He has said to me that it's important for me to do what is right for me at the moment. He asked me, what have we been doing for the last 2 years? Are you in love with me? He screamed at me, are you in love with me? And of course, when someone is like terrifying you, how can you say, yes, I'm in love with you? You know, I mean, no. And when you're acting like this, absolutely not. This is not a good time to ask that question if you want a positive response. And then that makes him more mad. And I think I'm closer to Brian than I've been to anybody in my life, probably than my family, because we've had to go through this sort of struggle. Basically, he's yelling at me and terrifying me, and I'm thinking, oh shit. And at one point he said, I could punch you in the nose right now, because I said I didn't know if I was in love with him or something, and I think he's not going to do it though. But he keeps yelling at me, and then he goes out of my house, slams the door as hard as he can slam it, which is kind of a crappy little door, then gets in his car, and when he slammed the door, I opened the door and said, don't call me and don't come back, because I just have had it. You know, I don't want someone terrorizing me in my own house. So then he got in the car and he backs out of the driveway so the tires squeal on his car, which is just like, oh God, you know, and then my neighbor called me and said, are you okay? Which is really embarrassing, you know, to have your neighbor hear all this shit. Oh, I know what he yelled. When he went out the door, before he slammed the door, he yelled, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, at the top of his lungs. So I think that was kind of what my neighbor called that. We've had to sort of unite through this rather than sort of kick and scratch and cause each other trouble. You know, like when he was in jail for 2 weeks, I couldn't say, well, when are you coming home? I had to be there and be supportive, and because he was having a hard time. So I had to like be tough and do what was going to help.
See, Steve and Denny think if they go away, we're going to have a real conversation. Little do they know
we're just going to talk about them. Anyway, so did you see what he did?
Did you know? Little do they know we've never had a real conversation in our lives.
It's easy when thinking about Brian's situation to wonder what it would be like if one were in his shoes. Most of us have done things in our past, or are still doing them, which did not seem harmful to anyone, but which are nonetheless unlawful. What would we do if suddenly we had to put our life on hold and go to jail? What would we do if we had to go to a place of confinement where one has to confront all the loneliness, all the boredom, and all the judgment experienced in prison?
God, don't know. Have no idea.
I'd hightail it down to Mexico like I'm doing anyway on Friday, so go live down there.
I think I'd run up some credit cards and not bother to pay them.
I'd backpack through China. Definitely.
Go out and enjoy the rest of freedom. Yeah. Smell the roses.
Oh, I'd be down here at the pier fishing. That's me. Fish is my life. You know what I mean? When it comes to fishing, you just call me the fishing man.
I give my kids absolutely anything and everything they could ever need or want.
Probably sail, just relax on the beach. Things like that.
I don't know what I would do. I'm from New Jersey, so this is pretty good for me right here.
And I do a lot of praying to God. Whatever happens when I'm in there, that He'll take care of me and guide me in His ways.
I'd spend most of all my time with her, as much as possible, and just enjoy being together.
I'd say I would, I don't know. Just don't know.
So we were in the house, and then eventually after they realized that nothing was forthcoming and that I wouldn't do the right thing, to their mind, they called on the radio and said, okay, come on down. And down came 5 more of them. And they proceeded to tear my house apart. And they did, bit by bit. I had to use the bathroom at one point. So I said, can I go to the bathroom? And he said, you haven't got any guns in there, have you? Well, just a Law's rocket launcher, that's all. Anyway, I went to the bathroom, and I sat in there, and I'll tell you, I evacuated. I'll tell you, I wanted all of me to go down the toilet. And I stayed in there as long as I could, and he came and knocked on the door and said, hey, I'm in Costa Rica, I'm not here.
Brian knows he will be facing some of his strongest fears while he's locked up, and maybe he didn't want us to see how scared he really was, in addition to his spiritual outlook.
Fear of entrapment will come up for various reasons. When your freedom is threatened, then fear of entrapment comes up.
A few people in Brian's recovery group had spent time in prison themselves, yet they shared his understanding of what lay ahead as a challenge for growth.
Recovery is a big issue in the penitentiary. You got a lot of dope addicts in there, a lot of dope fiends that can use the kind of energy that Brian has and the kind of example that he is, which makes me, when I talk to Brian about it, makes me excited for him, because Brian's into doing this work. He stated that. And this work is, there's no better place to do it that I can think of than in the joint. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's going, is to further that aim for himself and humanity.
I mean, the drug situation in prison is ludicrous. When I was in the federal prison, I was addicted to heroin the whole time, even though they were testing me. So obviously, testing is a farce. And I just wish I'd known Brian, 10 years ago instead of now, because he's given me some tools. And
he was a big dope fiend 10 years ago too.
Okay, the Brian I know now.
The guards are almost in the same position as the inmates. I mean, they see the ridiculousness of the system, and some of them have a sense of humor about them, and some have none. But, I mean, we're all in the same position. There's very little difference between the guards and the prisoners. They are all in the same situation. They're all under the control of the state, basically.
Pretty much adversarial. It's adversarial in the way that there is scary stuff going on in there, and people do die, and they die for the color of their skin, and they die for a wrong gesture.
There's people on both sides of the fence that choose to be victims and those that choose not to be, and that really is the main delineator between the people that make a good adjustment in prison or in life. And I think in that way, Brian is especially well equipped for his journey, because he will not be victimized.
I understand completely where he's coming from. 'Cause that's a thing for me too, kind of that inability to be completely vulnerable. So it's a guy thing.
The journey of self-discovery involves being brutally honest about oneself. But it's a journey that has no end, only completions along the way.
The alchemical mixture is all in the jar. Now it's going to take this time to ferment, to foment, to bubble and boil and transform. And what comes out is the alchemist's gold. And that will be me when I get out of jail.
Part of Brian's plea bargain agreement was that he had to submit to random drug testing and phone a urinalysis clinic every day to see if his number was up. He was among the 1 out of every 46 Americans currently under some form of government supervision. The fact remains, however, that Brian gambled with drug smuggling and lost. Yet consciously or unconsciously, he seemed to be campaigning for himself in front of the camera.
Society is not served as well as it could be by my going to jail. Society could be better served. And it's a bogus law to begin with.
Was he bracing himself?
Imagine chasing people for marijuana. In 1943, the government issued a film promoting the benefits of the hemp plant.
Do you know that marijuana became illegal from a result of the DuPonts in the 1930s got a patent on the pulp and paper process from wood, from trees. And prior to that, everything was coming from hemp. 4 acres of hemp produces, or 1 acre of hemp produces as much paper product as 4 acres of trees. And the acre of hemp takes a year to grow, and the 4 acres of trees take 75 years to grow. So when the DuPonts got that patent, they started a lobby against marijuana, and they started calling it marijuana, preying on the racial overtone that goes through the white dominant society in this country, that these Spanish people and black people were delirious in corners smoking this marijuana, and they changed the name from hemp to marijuana for that, and eventually got it illegal. And it was all about paper. It was broken. The fact of the matter is, the law was broken. But the fact of the matter also is, it's a fucking bad law.
It's a marijuana case, for Christ's sakes, you know?
Really? My lawyer says this is reefer.
You know,
And it's 1987 reefer at that. And what's more, you don't have a joint of it.
I know, that's unbelievable.
And it is just reefer.
You know, I mean, if this country...
Are you watching out there? Are you having a drink while you're watching? Because if you are, let me tell you, you're doing way more damage to yourself than if you're smoking reefer. And I'm not promoting that you do either of it. But let me tell you something. If you're drinking, you ought to look at these laws. Thank you. I'm having coffee. That's a stimulant. Caffeine.
Legal one.
A legal one.
I know it is.
And they give you this in the Hooskow, too. Lots of it.
Is that right?
When we talk about it, sometimes he tells me he doesn't think he's done anything wrong, and that the laws are wrong and everything. And so that's about it. That's all he usually talks about.
Do you agree with him?
To an extent. I don't agree that he's not done anything wrong and that the laws are wrong, but they are partially, see? And so I don't really agree with him, but to an extent I do.
You mean, do you think the laws are wrong in the sense that the punishment is too much?
No.
You think he should do 10 years in prison?
Punishment, as they say, the punishment should fit the crime.
And does it?
Yeah.
It's going to be tough being a part of a healing process in prison, because a lot of prisoners resent that shit. A lot of people in jail resent that. And, you know, it's been concerning me recently about, while I'm in jail, people in prison seeing this film. That could cause a lot of problems for me.
Well, it could also open a lot of
It
stuff.
could, but it could also cause a lot of problems. It could piss a lot of them off. I know how temperamental this whole situation is. And anything that upsets those people, the way that they show they're upset with a guy like me is by sticking it in my ass. And sticking it in my ass means giving me more time. One day, I was in there was a new directive came out that they had to observe you pee. They had to come and watch you take your equipment out and load up the bottle. And, you know, I can't go to the bathroom and pee if you're standing there.
Yeah.
I have difficulty with anyone there. And some strange woman's going to come in and watch me pee? No way. Like the DEA said, this is not about change or rehabilitation. This is about crushing your life. So if I'm doing anything that is helping my life, I see them saying, yeah, look at this. I showed up for a test, and I was on my way into the bathroom, and the new woman got up to come into the bathroom with me. And the one who was leaving said, no, Brian is the one person who we don't observe. We know that he's okay.
That's fantastic.
Oh, I was so relieved to actually hear those words, you know, because it made going in and peeing a dreadful thing. Because I dreaded, I would have bad dreams about going in and some woman coming watching me pee. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
It just was so disturbing to me. It was like a violation. I guess it probably brought me back to sitting on that Christian brother's lap getting abused, you know?
Okay, they test you for drug use in there, and urinalysis is the method of test, and most of the guards think it's degrading as you'd think. Nobody wants to watch somebody else's dick when they pee, and a few may, but they don't. Most of them, the staff, do not take it any more seriously than we do. I mean, as long as it's not violent and they're not in danger, I mean, they want to just get home every day.
Eventually, before they left that day, myself and the bad cop, so-called bad cop, I know he's just doing his job, and I know he's got some kind of thinks he's doing right with it. I don't think that makes it right, but it doesn't make it wrong either, I suppose. We were playing pool in my pool room before it was over, and he wanted to talk to me about the case while we were playing pool, and I said, look, we'll play pool, I'll play pool, you'll play pool, we'll talk about cars, we'll talk about girls, we'll talk about drinking, but we're not talking about the case because I got nothing to say about it, okay? So he was okay with that, and we did. There is sadness when I think of my children, and I'm not going to be with the kids, but there's not much anger.
Not any?
Oh, there probably is some. However, I went through a lot of that anger and hostility, and basically the anger is non-acceptance, and I've come to a place of acceptance of exactly what's going on as perfect for the unfolding destiny of Brian O'Day. I don't know about anybody else. And there's a part of me, I so hesitate to say this, but there is a part of me that is looking forward to going to prison, that wants to go.
It has some of the feeling of denial in it, like denial of the real grief that is entailed in this whole process that he's going through. I pick up some of that because he kind of deadpans it.
Right.
We were talking about, false friends or real friends, or in terms of Brian. You have to keep up. You have to hold together. And I think that's what comes through as maybe a front. He can't be sitting there whimpering. And like he always says, I'll have plenty of time for that, and it's true.
I don't want to run from anything anymore. And the fact of the matter is, just going through what I'm going through right now is kind of fearful from time to time. But I come, and I know that when I walk into that prison, I'm going to be just almost to my knees with feeling.
It's been a real test for him to stay out there because he could have run. He could have left. He could have done something which a lot of people do. And people suggested that to him. All kinds of people suggested to him, maybe you better get out of here. And I think that it's really admirable that he has gone through this whole thing and been totally honest and totally upfront, not tried to get away, has totally faced this whole thing. And I think that that's a big commitment for him as far as the rest of his life.
So Tuesday, countdown. It's now Friday the 26th at 8 p.m. Tuesday at 11, I'm a goner. And you are paying for it. Imagine that. Cut.
To realize that he was a friend as I noticed his honesty more and more. And that he wasn't really trying to project a certain image of himself, but that he was happy when we could know him just as he is.
I must say that probably Brian has handled it better than anybody I've ever seen handle it. I think it's because of his newfound appreciation for his own self-worth. He just figures he can handle just about anything, and he's kind of paying his dues. I don't think Brian ever thought for a second of running away from this situation or not facing it the way he's faced everything else the last few years.
I've had the biggest mouth, with him. I kept saying, no one promised you a rose garden. You are a service person, and you lost your way, and you're still a service person. And if you have to be of service in prison, then that's what you have to do. So if his place is in prison to touch prisoners, then so be that. But it is insane.
This is like the final chapter in that part of his life that had to do with drugs and, the last 20 years or whatever it's been. And once this is over with, I think he sees it as, then it will all be behind me. Once he's done time in jail, then it will be behind me and I can go on with my life. It will be a finished story, final chapter. He'll never have to look over his shoulder.
I focused on the fearful aspect of it for a couple of months, and it kicked my ass. I hated it. I hated everything that was happening. And once I realized that I was in charge of my ass kicking, I stopped doing it, and I started looking at the opportunity of it. The fact of the matter is, I'll finish writing a book or two. Hope I don't have a whole lot more time to write more than two, though.
Tell me, why is it so blue? The mirror that you look into is casting shadows. Only you can see. You overlook the evidence of overflowing innocence that pulls my heart to gaze upon your face. It's you I long to embrace. Silent warrior, come to me. Love is alive, waiting your company. Yeah. Silent warrior, wake from your dream. Love is alive, waiting your company. Even in your darkest night, day is not as far as it may seem. And it's when you end your fight, that is when peace will appear. Love is alive, waiting your company. Come to me and know that love's alive, it's waiting your company. Silent warrior.
Brian's story really isn't that unusual. There are countless people, inside of prison and out, who have much to offer the community, but who are ignored. Brian entered Terminal Island Prison on July 31st, 1991. He participates in recovery groups and is trying to get transferred to Canada, where he will be eligible for parole.